James' workshop was in fact mucking about, but orcs are never beaten. So today we're going to talk about the orc point changes, what's new for the orcs, some rules updates, and what the orcs can look forward to and where we may shift. So today we're going to vent as well as look through some of the new changes that some of the orcs are maybe frustrated with while ultimately being optimistic because the orcs are anything but dead and green is still best. So with that being said, our sponsors get a shout out for also being the best. So today our Baron of Dice, they make high quality custom dice. If you enjoy our content and want to show some love, check out Baron of Dice custom dice, including Wall Tactics dice. To support us, use our discount code in the description because nobody likes taxes. So shout out to them and their high quality dice. And shout out to Forge Fire Gaming. They set for high balanced terrain sets that I use at home to come pre-painted with slotted acrylic bases, allowing for easy base removal without sliding. Check out the link in the description. So shout out to our sponsors. Now, let's get straight into the point changes because that's what everybody needs to get here for and wants to know. That way we have some context as we move forward with this conversation. Now, will we be a little frustrated? Yes. Are there some good points here? Yes. There's good stuff to look forward to, and I'm actually quite excited. Of course, this is live, so what's up with y'all? Whoa, for the live chat. Yes. Plenty of you guys. Yeah, me too. Our points went up about 60 is a good way to put it. Overall, as we look at this, 60 is like a good average right there. Like we kind of guesstimated in the previous video where I was showing kind of the rumors, quote unquote. I suspected you'll usually lose about 1 unit, and some kind of gets actually gain some point increase by the point decreases. So let's talk about the first not surprising increase is the Big Mac with shock attack gun. Went up 10 points for an overall cost of 85 points. Not to be unexpected, it was getting still brought on multiple different orc detachments. It does feel a little bit overdone because with Mordaka being nerfed, you could kind of just seeing this getting up to 80 points, and this would still be kind of in its way. Orcs were never looking too powerful to the point that we needed another nerf. A lot of all of this seems to be coming as in a delayed reaction or like a aftershock of what Mordaka did to the general 40k community, right? And the Big Mac with shock attack gun was kind of like the representative flagship of that, with his -4 AP built in, getting up to 5 with the tank buster. So as we can see here that this looks like a delayed reaction, as you would kind of see an earthquake being the rule changes for the detachment, and then a tsunami coming in after and hitting us with points. Now, is it so devastating that I would say orcs are destroyed? No. So 10 points increase on this, I still see people bringing multiple, if not still 3 Big Macs with shock attack guns. But if you're somebody who simply can't bear that point cost increase because a simple Big Mac is another viable option. So if you want to check that out, we have the Dreadmod video, explore that more. And on Friday, we're going to unpack this even further as we get through some of these point costs. But I do think if you're building your list out right now, just consider a Big Mac. And if you want to know my thoughts, I put that in other videos as well a couple times. But then we move on to 20-man boy mobs. Now, a lot of people felt like this came out of nowhere. I was someone who did not like that. I was a bit frustrated. A lot of our, list that we've showed off here, whether it's War Horde, whether it's Bully Boys, whether it's any multitude of orc detachments, they were able to take advantage of a 20-man unit of orc boys with 2 characters, make it kind of the focal point of the list. Felt really good to play orcs and feel like you could bully them in table, not just by killing people, but by using OC and actually playing the mission and tagging units, having finesse and then kind of some cunning to your play. But in reality, this was targeted towards Green Tide. Now, the small elite community, as you can say, that are Green Tide players that keep playing it until they're effective with it and then take it to events, we're getting good, efficient, consistent results. And so in that way, people were considering that that's most likely why the 20-man unit of Orc Boys went up. It's very possible that people would just play a Green Tide and then go 4x and 1, whatever it may be. But that's easier said than done. It takes a lot of work to move into that. So orcs losing that is kind of discouraging to our identity, where we normally are known for playing a literal horde army, and we get punished for moving into a literal horde army. So those people who aren't, just spamming the Big Mac with shock attack gun and a docket sort of detachment, move over to something like boy mobs. Someone even personally like myself would constantly encourage people to do if they were trying to be successful just shooting people off the table. Move the 20-man unit of boys. In this case, they just felt like they needed to not only stop a little bit Green Tide going into play, but then mobs themselves, possibly still, like I said, a delayed reaction to more DACA, as people would take advantage of a 20-point mob unit of boys sometimes and give it wall multiple turns in the game, multiple of those mobs. So again, this looks like a very slow imperial anime type of administrative abilities going on here at GW, which is why the frustration lingers. As we move on to 10-man Flashkits unit, again, obviously playing for the debts of more DACA in this case, because it's only the 10-man Flashkits unit. When I was looking at the rumors and even thinking about it, I was thinking, well, Flashkits, 5-man units going up would be punishing. So in that case, I'm very glad that the 5-man SWAT teams aren't going up in costs. But the 10-man just kind of shows GW's hand, just like when we seen the initial nerf to Green Tide and the Pain Boss caught a point increase because it looked like GW just pressed hashtag Excel on their Excel spreadsheet, and they just changed anything pain related plus 10 points. So it just looks like they're doing something like that with Flash Kits, where they're just like, all right, just change it up. It was a problem with Tactical Brigade, for example. So I still think that the Big Mac with Mac Captain and Tactical Brigade is still obviously worth taking, even with this as a literal game-changing unit in itself. If GW is really looking to address this, you would have to remove the Big Mac and Mega Armor, not simply just keep increasing point costs on stuff in a really inefficient way, which is what GW likes to do. But we move on. We're just happy that it's not 5-man Flash Kits units, right? I'm just expressing what Orc players are seeing here and identifying. And we move on to Zagra. He's been in existence this entire time. You know, even when I go play locally or talk to people that I know, and I explain Zagrod or I'm using Zadrog, they go, well, he doesn't do that because more DACA got changed or something like that to that degree. Or does he still do that? Wow, I thought he was changed, or that's pretty broken. He did that the whole time. He did that the whole time. You know, I usually could suggested him in Dreadmob, for example. A lot of the time, people would brought him in War Horde. Shout out to someone like Brett, who was like, I like him, but I don't want to break my back. You know, he's just very, very efficient if you like to play the movement game shenanigans of 40K and playing with mobs. And so him going up in 10 points, I would say for his actual ability, that's actually kind of vibe. That's kind of fair, right? I'm not going to say GW is slapping us, but it was just they finally noticed only because more DACA. So then, as I would still run Zagran, you know, it's fine to see he's much better than a war boss, so he should cost more than a war boss. And then we move on even more than what he was, and then we move on to a truck, which was very fundamental and kind of like a pillar of a lot of Orc lists, a lot of Orc archetypes and detachments, and that frustrated the rest of the Orc the Warhammer community. Orc players would look around and say, well, a Rhino is 75 points and a truck is 70. They get a Hunter Killer Missile, they get a armor save, they get smoke, they get different abilities. But remember, it's also they get different packages. We get firing deck, and just the kind of units the combinations we put in there as we look forward to point decreases as well is why a truck is so viable. So a lot of the time people don't really consider that you would use the truck with a mech, which we have a video on that as well, to use it for its firing deck capability to take advantage of tank busters, lootas, flash kits, whatever they are. So it was more than just its ability to be a safe bunker and encapsulate your units. Now, is 5 points too much? No. That's still fair, and I think Orcs can kind of survive that and work around that. It's just unfortunate to see overall that, you know, they still felt the need to do it, as Orcs didn't really seem like they needed that much more tuning, as they were already kind of declining and kind of finding their way as it is, and the community itself figured it out too. They had definitely weaknesses to a truck, you know, it getting tagged and surrounded for how small it was and how big the Orc units are themselves getting out. And with, you know, there's definitely things that matter here with the truck going down. Then we go to tank busters, which actually, as much as we don't like to see them go up anymore, 140 is probably the fair cost, the most fair that you can get to before you kind of feel like you're being overly punished. But it is annoying to see, because a lot of the time when we seen the data sheet came out, people were saying, well, let's just switch the Breaker Boys and the Tank Busters, right? Let the Breaker Boys be 120 and the Tank Busters be 140. And in this case, it's like GW barely just started to figure out what everybody kind of knew just looking at the data sheets when they came out. So I think it's cool that they didn't overdo it, make it like 145 or something where it would get obnoxious, because I still want people that are playing War Horde, Bully Boys, whatever it may be, to hunt, still have access to taking Tank Busters without a leader, right? So that's cool too. And then yes, the Ludas actually went up as well on here, that they went up for the 10-man unit, went up 15 points. So the 10-man Luda unit as well, alongside the Tank Busters, went up cost as well. So when we look at the tank buster compared to the 10-man Luda unit, you're looking at the difference of what is it, 25 points now. What really is the real appeal here to taking Ludas over tank busters now? If GW just wants us to stop shooting by just focusing on Ludas, which is what that looked at, well, you're just pushing us more towards tank busters, right? And that's what's also unappealing as well, because if you were playing something like Dread Mob and you were playing Ludas, you already had a lot of your CP wrapped up in other units. So even doing something on Overwatch required conditioning where you can stage up this moderately large 11-man unit onto an actual objective without your unit already being dead or blowing itself up from utilizing the button, and then it actually taking advantage of Overwatch by someone stepping on it that's of value and not, taking advantage of other ways to get away from this. So it wasn't a broken ability. It was just a different way to Orks to shoot while they're hitting on sixes as GW intended. So Luda's going up was still quite discouraging to playing any alternative DACA units to Orks. So as a whole, with these point increases on Orks, it just looks like GW is trying to kind of pigeonhole us into playing War Horde. A lot of people are feeling in this case where, well, if you just want us to play War Horde and not really expand out of tank busters and shock attack guns and DACA, then why don't you make more appealing units, have better keywords, capabilities, or decreases as we go over and look at the decreases on what GW actually looked at, right? So we have Squig, which initially, when the rumors came out, were encouraging. We were like, that's awesome that they might come down. Let's see how much. Let's not get, overlooked by getting a minor increase, but we did get a minor decrease. I mean, and it was only 10 points. 10 points, not sufficient. Not sufficient at all. Squig Hog Boys where they used to be, which is index, because this is how GW's memory works, is they really only consider us in the beginning of the edition and index for how powerful we are with those Squig Hog Boys, and they hold us to that standard. Kind of forgetting that in index we had on that unit, which is what made it so potent. Aside from the game also just kind of evolving alongside it. So Squig Hog Boys going on 10 just isn't, as my opinion. They were 160. They needed to come down to 130 to really be considered as somewhat anything like competitive. GW actually should consider getting a look at their data sheet, letting them get some AP, and maybe getting their data sheet ability if they want, as we look on other changes that we're going to look on as we go through this video, that can validate why I'm saying they look at their data sheet if they're not willing to decrease them to a proper point cost, because minus 10 points doesn't really change your hunt list, the War Horde list that was already trying to incorporate these Squig Hog Boys. This is not going to do anything to make them any more appealing or serve a role or have a purpose other than what they already failed to do prior. So as it was a decrease, this doesn't really matter too much to most people, honestly, as a whole, as they would need 20-30 points to come down from a 10-man unit, and then it's 20 points for the large unit. So I do think that there is a place for Squig Hog Boys to be played and to be improved upon, but I think if you're not looking at them, GW scared to look at them, then look at their characters. Their character need to be changed. WAAAGH maybe return to his index, and the character, the Beast Boss and Squigazor himself, should need to be more appealing than defaulting the Beast Bosses on foot with Beast Snagga Boys, which is what already people are using and have been using since the Codex and the Index came out. And it was just, well, let's just play 3 of these, right? And it's just not always the answer, and it's not really fun at this point for a lot of people that are kind of tired of the type, even though it's quite viable. So if you have it and you're new, don't get discouraged by this. Keep running your Snagga Boys and such like that. But I'm just giving context and really pointing out what the Squig Hog Boy change really impact has, which is not much at all. But what can have some impact here as we look at the future is we have Boom Daka Snazwagons went down 10 points. They're 170. No, sorry, not 170. They are 70 points right now. So they took a minus 10 point cost, which is great. They used to be 80 points. That felt kind of annoying. Even 75 would be discouraging. 70 is quite cheap for its aura, the volume of fire it has. Overall, it's just getting to the point that it's a data sheet and stat line, as all these buggies are, for a cheap cost that can be viable. So then we move on to the Custom Mega Blaster / Shock Jump Jackster. They both went down minus 5 points, with sitting at a flat 70 points. Again, just getting to the point where they're looking like a semi-viable stat line now. I don't think the Custom Booster Blaster takes a place over something like a Boom Daka or a Shock Jump Jagster for those similar or equivalent, point costs. Therefore, The shock jump jacks, as I've discussed, maybe in my video or in a bully boy video, taking something like a shock jump so you can open up space and take up positioning on the table isn't inconceivable outside of something like Cult of Speed for its utility. As we're looking at these buggies are closing in on the cost of something like a Stormboy unit, right? So now we're going to start comparing what can I get for the Stormboy cost to something like these units. Then we have the Ruckachuk Squig buggy, which is the indirect buggy as well. Now, he it gets overlooked a lot, but there might be some utility here as we look towards the future, right? He does give off mortal wound. He does have a reduced mobility ability to him. So if you're looking to explore with him, there is talk in that we can explore in the future. Then we look at the Megatrack Scrap Jet, which is typically known for just like the scrapping, fighting, delivering mortal wounds on the impact charge unit. So him getting the changes as well that we're going to look at is quite interesting when we're looking at, well, what do I want to look as kind of like a skirmish, run out, fight, good objective, take up table space kind of unit for certain costs. Can I dust this dude off? And in that case, yes, I think you can totally dust this guy off, start getting him incorporated into play to a little bit, but don't expect too much because these guys ultimately just lack volume in their shooting, which is typically what you would need as an orc to offset your horrible stat line or debuffs and debuffs in the game and the lack of AP and such like that. And then in combat, they also hit on 4s, not on 3s. So they're quite incapable of actually committing good combat. So you're really mostly just looking at the mortal wounds and it to be tougher than anything else at its cheap point cost. But what is actually the most interesting out of all these changes is to the def Coptas. And of course, this is live, so I'll check out the live right here before I move on to the next part. Don't worry. But because you guys are popping off right now. But for the Def Coptas, we're looking at 3-man Def Copta units have dropped to 80 points, the equivalent of a 10-man boy unit. Then we have for the 6-man unit of Def Coptas is minus 20 points for 160 point cost. So you're getting nice. Each Def Copter is 4 wounds. T6, 4 up armor save, built-in invuln, can drop mortal wounds if it flies over you. Flies, the only other thing that has deep strike other than Stormboys innately. So all these costs on these decreases minus the Squig Hog Boys are in the Ruckachuk. You're getting to the point where it's, can I substitute a Stormboy, a biker unit, whatever it may be for this cheap cost to start running around and getting incorporated into the game and just getting tougher stat lines on here to get more commitment out of the enemies. And I think that's getting more appealing now. As we look to the actual changes as well, with all these point decreases, we can look at the new Culta Speed Detachment rule. Now, before we unpack that, let me give a shout out to the live chat. Shout out to you, Gets, and of course, Andrew Stone being super supportive. Still going to knock the teeth out, but GW hits anything we play. Now, Stealth War Horde. War Horde. Yeah, I think it's kind of feels like that, right? Whenever we do start, because they hit units that weren't exactly just tank busters. They hit other detachments along the line with this debuff, this nerfing, which made us look like we're just going to move back towards War Horde again and play good old reliable combinations and units and just get stuck in the good old-fashioned way and just enjoy it, which is good, which we keep defaulting to since 8th edition, which is let's get some sustained hits and get a lot of units and getting these punches. And kind of people are kind of getting discouraged of, well, I own all this other stuff, which is the point of being an orc player, and this is what we're using it for. It's not even to the point that we were abusing the meta by any means. We were just trying to play different stuff. Do I even want to explore, paint and unpack any other things? That's what becomes the most discouraging about this. But the most encouraging kid is Andrew Stone again for 20 WAAAGH Tactic gifted memberships. Wow, shout out to that kid. All you chat. So we got 70 live. Goodness, at least shout out to you. We do have membership videos that we put on where we were talking about the possible changes that were going to come. We're exploring the new enemy codexes and such like that. So shout out to you, man. Very supportive. It means a lot to us, and it encourages all. And hopefully the rest of you orc gets to keep getting stuck in, and check out the playlist for also other utility videos that can help you guys learn how to get stuck in. So thank you very much, Andrew. And as we look at the new Cult of Speed, we have the Adrenaline Junkies Detachment rule. Cult of Speed is freak units from your army are eligible to shoot and declare a charge in a turn in which they advanced or fell back. So now you can advance, shoot, and charge with anything that's keyworded speed freak units. So as we looked at all those buggies and you incorporate the Def Coptas and the biker units, now you can see that these is getting cheap trash viability on the field that is advancing up and down the field, constantly shooting, putting pressure. Now, a couple questions here that I have now, kind of gathered from the community as a whole that I kind of wanted to unpack is 18 Def Coptas viable or not? Yes. I know that's been a meme for a while, but 18 Def Coptas has been viable the whole time for Cult of Speed, as you do have a stratagem to give a 6 brick or pretty much any vehicle that's Cult of Speed. Sorry, I should break this down properly. But if you have a stratagem to give any Cult of Speed unit, then it gives it toughness. If it's a vehicle of greater than 8, then it gets it on a 5+. So you would give an invuln to like a battle wagon, for example. But if it's not, then it's, for example, if it's a buggy, you get a 4-up invuln. If it's a Def Copta unit, because it's a multitude of units, you now have a 4-up invuln to your Def Copta unit. So now you've made this unit quite durable, point for point, with its ablative wounds. And then you also have to keep in mind that on the rest of the detachment, you still have reactive moves. You have +1 to wound when charging. You have sorry, what are the other capability? I was thinking other cool ones, and I was thinking brain fart. You have the enhancements for taking transports and disembarking units. So is this actual viable alongside this big brick of Def Coptas? Yes. As you're looking at quite cheap poison investments for just a big brick of ablative wounds. And then when you look at the next question is, how many buggies are viable? As we start to kind of find this balance of damage to trash modality in this list, right? You're going to look at how much buggies deliver a little bit of both, or they're enough of a tool that it becomes a factor into play. If I was going to prioritize certain buggies, it would, like I was kind of alluding to earlier, your scrap chat would be kind of like the skirmisher. You would bring a shock jump dragster to kind of take space for yourself on something like search and destroy, where you can jump out and take a table corner. In this case, you'd actually be able to shoot now and actually precision people, allow stuff for strategic reserves to come in, or for just your trucks to move out, your other buggies to move out, whatever else you have on the field. And I think buggies still are now at the point where they're just a decent fixed stat line point for point. A lot of time people overlook them because they're like, well, Gladiator Lance will just kill them. Well, they still have to roll for it. And keep in mind, they can, they can still impact the field by how much commitment the enemy has to take into actually killing them. A lot of the time, they'd rather be using that Gladiator Lancer to pop a battle wagon, to pop a truck, and they're going to end up kind of ignoring your buggies more sometimes when you wouldn't even expect it. So I think buggies definitely have play. You just have to, find the tempo that you need to take them at, right? Then we look at how much is the damage support does it actually need. So there's the units like Breaker Boys, when you're looking at, well, faster than use, where I can disembark a war boss, and Breaker Boys go crump someone on the wall. Then you look at, well, maybe a 20-man unit of Beast Snagger Boys with the Beast Boss and a battle wagon, and I take the battle wagon and I move up and I drop the 20 brick, and then they get out and they advance and then they charge alongside bricks of Def Coptas and then brick of war bikers belong trikes. This is so much pressure, and then ablative wounds and thickness of 6 and 5-up invulns that you're just holding the enemy back while you're just kind of taking up all your points and controlling the battlefield. And the tempo of the game can be really interesting. If they try to take the initiative on you, there are stratagems that you can throttle damage with sustained or lethal if you start getting closer with these big bricks of Def Cop. And then, so in that case, we have how much does this really matter, right? I think it matters greatly to those who are already kind of getting conditioned to playing pressure sort of lists, trash focus based lists, moving big bricks of units. But there is a threshold that you kind of can't pass, where you just have too much big awkward bases and it becomes impractical. And no matter how much you reduce these buggies and you give them this advance in charge without giving them the ability to actually kill anything, without actually having the ability to impact the game in a meaningful way, it's what's it going to take to make this actually important. So, sorry, I was in here. Sorry, guys. So, does this actually matter? Yes. But GW is kind of giving us the very bottom of the barrel in this case, because all in all, what really looking at the Cult of Speed is that it simply doesn't actually deliver any kind of real damage, and requires a lot of bashing your head into wall sort of play to understand how to do this. Now, I think if you're looking to play teams or you have an extensive collection and you're used to playing, this kind of game where you're playing the main mission and putting the tempo on the enemy, then you can find utility in Cult of Speed. But all in all, this takes a little bit more to unpack, and we'll look more at that as we look at what's changed. Now, we have the tank busters. Sorry, not tank busters. The squig bombs. So the squig bombs have now been focused down to one simplified, consistent rule set, which is once per battle for each bomb squig this unit has. After this unit ends a normal move, you can use one bomb squig. If you do so, select one enemy unit within 12 and visible to this unit and roll a d6. On a 3+, the enemy unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. That's hyper frustrating, as you can obviously point out the differences. Now, every bomb squig must be visible. I would say big bomb squig unit user must be visible to the unit that it wants to use it on. And it's now all on a 3+ instead of a 2+. So now it's less consistent, and you have to expose yourself to taking damage. Keep in mind, this is all happening on a normal move. Now, something I want to point out first is some people still have argued the fact that, well, maybe this wording means I can just offload all my bomb squigs. Well, there's an FAQ that you can check out on your GW app that is up to date March 12, 2025, where it's asked, can a unit equipped with multiple bomb squigs use the ability more than once each phase? And they say no. So that this rule change or simplification, consolidation doesn't overlook this FAQ. The FAQ clears up this. So don't use multiple bomb squigs. Can't do that. You do have to do it based off a normal move. This brings into play GW not understand orcs. In that case, you gave us units and have army-wide ability that it requires us to, advance and charge. And this is a normal move for units that have all been applied, other than tank busters, to units that want to advance when they're using this, when they're being exposed. Otherwise, why would I expose these units to take damage, to have an inconsistent bomb squig? And if that's the case, what is the value of the bomb squig, right? If I don't have the capability to synergize it with what my army's actually trying to do, what am I paying for in its cost? So does the units that have bomb squigs deserve, point decreases? They kind of should have gotten them in this case already, because the bomb squig now kind of doesn't really have its purpose. When am I going to just simply be sitting there and be like, well, let me just point my head out to the unit that's 12 inches that I'm for some reason not moving out 6 inches and charging? Like, what are we talking about here, right? So it's just kind of silly. It's overall just kind of silly. That's why our players are looking at it. I know other people are saying, well, now my lone op can't hide in the building and interact and ruin all your stratagems. Yes, that's the reason we had this unit, right? So we can actually interact with that. It's just a different way to interact with it. It doesn't mean you can't use that unit, other person who's using that assassin. It just means you have to use them differently, right? And in this case, UW said, well, no, new orc players, you don't have to use it at all now. It makes sense in your army now. So that's cool. Overall, it is simplified. So at least that's cool that we now know what it does. Keep in mind, if your truck moves and your tank busters disembark, you can't throw your bomb squigs. So in that case, it's still not really making sense either. Well, thanks for that. But we look at what can orcs explore, right? So let's be a little bit more positive here, because I'm looking at you guys. What's going on in the chat? Still see you guys looking excited. Can orcs utilize Cult of Speed MSU trash list? As we look at how the missions are changing, the different tempo that the game can be played with challenger cards, if challengers are even accepted, right? It's starting to seem like there's whispers in the warp that challenger cards aren't going to be accepted competitively. So we'll keep an ear on that. But can people actually play a sort of game where they bring just enough damage along with just enough efficient data sheets and trash that they tag you when they don't want to kill you? I think there is actually an answer here, right? A lot of the time when I'm talking about boys units or Zagrot units, units that want to be that bad touch, Devcopters can end up being kind of that sort of unit that ends up being a bad touch unit, where it just kind of maneuvers ways up the field slowly and starts getting shots off and charges, and there's too many of them, and you got the bikers also moving up the field in that case, alongside whatever orc infantry units and transports that you have on the battlefield as well. I think there's definitely a way to play there, right? Whenever you incorporate board control, OC, pressure, you're still playing the orc way. We have also, speaking of pressure, the hunt. Is the hunt also a viable option? As we were thinking about how the hunt ends up playing its game, leaning back more into kill rigs, bunch of units of MSU Snagga boys, a little bit maybe of tank buster support of what it may be. There's a chance that you can still end up bringing tank busters and having that early game pressure and taking advantage of the proper utilization of the Hunt's datasheet ability to give some units more AP, and just putting volume on the different kind of data sheets that exist in 40K right now in the meta. Or you could end up leaning into War Horde. Will War Horde end up becoming supreme again? Just, well, it already was. Well, it reigns supreme, right? Where it's just undeniable, where everybody just falls back to War Horde, accepted where your bad, hard challenges are, your matchup dependent games are, and just kind of fall back on that. Go back and just accept the changes, drop a couple units, and move on, right? So I think War Horde, all in all, of course, is amazing as just a core data sheet. And I mean, data sheet, sorry, a detachment rule. But I think this is where GW's understanding of our identity kind of lies and stops, right? They just see us as War Horde and they just go, this is kind of where we're going to hold you guys at. We don't really, when you get out of this box here of a little bit of DACA, we don't want to change anything else of what you use. And if you do, we're kind of discouraging that to a certain degree. So it seems like War Horde is kind of going to reign supreme, at least while Orks figure out what's going on here. But as for the other Ork detachments, do I think they still have play? Yeah. Because as I said at the start of the video, I don't think Orks are dead by any means. I don't think these are hugely impactful changes that are going to corrupt our capabilities to win events, or you win your local RTTs or your league games or your games with your friends. You're typically going to lose the equivalent of a Storm Boy or a Boys unit, and you can work around that as an Ork player. That's something that kind of we should be used, not necessarily used to because we accept that, but it's because that's kind of a part of our identity too. We're rugged, right? So we can overcome these sort of changes and these sort of challenges. So will the Great Wall rise to the challenge is what I'm asking. Now, I don't typically just mean the Green Tide, for example, as a detachment, but I mean the Ork community as a whole, where you just don't get discouraged because GW themselves are failing to understand their own rules when we understand them and where they're going to lead as soon as they come out. We don't like rules like more DACA, right? We understood that, Mega Knobs don't need necessarily a 4-up invuln, but you didn't have to change all of the points and also limit the keywords to the detachment as well to just kind of bring that detachment to a dead stop. But they're not looking to expand upon that, which is what brings the frustrations from the Ork community is, at one point you don't like us to take what is viable and consistent and what you would call spam, but at the same time, if we move away from that, then you kind of find it over there and start kind of nerfing in that direction too, as we have the hobby delay. If you're a newer or intermediate player, is what I'm more specifically kind of worried about or speaking out for, is how am I actually going to catch up to all these changes for my model counts compared to my friends or my local leagues, where I just kind of have to change off right now whatever detachments I was exploring and what units will actually evolve, but not in a positive way, right? Our walker units didn't get the ability to move through terrain. Even Astra Militarum tanks can now move through terrain, for example. So it's not the out of the question rule that one of our, if not any of our Titanic walkers can kind of develop that ability as well. So we can move away from just simply wanting to bring breaker boys and tank busters and try to incorporate, Morkanauts, Gorkanauts, Killikans, and such like that. So even though I'm still positive on all those things and where we're at as a community as a whole, this is where, the Ork frustration actually is. And we actually don't speak up because we, want to have these really annoying, frustrating rules upon you as or fellow community people and such, but we do it because we just want to expand and use any of our other toys, quote unquote, that you guys would as well, in an efficient way, which it's not like we're being just only nerfed upon until we're quelled into a sit in your little War Horde box and be the same thing you've always been, right? So in that case, hopefully GW kind of pulls back on this, maybe even if they obviously they'll never like think they're wrong, as even the grand 40K community looked back on something like Bully Boys and said, well, you guys went too far, now this is kind of dead as a whole. Even when that's the case, they don't really take anything back. But out the side door, you guys could adopt the ability to move through terrain buildings for walkers, for example, if you want us to move into the same elite mechanized meta that does exist that you don't want us to counter by using mobs of boys or Zod or more tank busters in that case, right? So that's all good. We love to explore that too, but that's really why the Orks are kind of just looking down at this, like why that happened. Now, do I think Orcs can still rise and win? Yeah, but people are definitely not looking happy about that. Do I think Green Tide will change points to points went up just a little bit, about 50 points? No, I don't think lists are necessarily broken, but they do become more challenging to already play, as Green Tide lists were kind of I've used this a bunch of times, and each tool does something on said go turn before I actually execute my WAAAGH, which is about timing and understanding of this detachment a lot, because I can't lose resources too late, but I also can't commit to too early and lose everything without actually getting board control out of it. So it's hard to say when you start losing tools, but I do think, based off what the community itself is saying, I think the inner sub community of the org player base, which is like Green Tide right now, is they still feel pretty confident as a whole that they can run it, and I do too. Based off the archetypes that are kind of more centralized to like 5 characters. So what else are people bringing up here? Yeah, Def Copters are definitely cheaper in a way that is very interesting, whether you're playing War Horde or whatever it may be, because they now at the cost where it's, do I bring Storm Boys or do I bring Def Copters? There's a very valid question. One can actually fight and try to take a bully over an objective or other small units, and the other one just kind of exists because it has a smaller profile. So this is something you can start cutting points for and feel pretty positive about. And I like that cost where they're at, and they definitely become more interesting. And tip you for my boy Eka, because yes, Ludas went up for 10. They went up 15 points actually for the unit of 10, right? So they're 115 points now for a 10-man unit of Ludas, which is definitely very annoying. As a tank buster becomes very comparable, and you're just like, okay, were you just mad that I used it once? Will ignore cover? Get finder goggles. Yeah, my boy, shout out to Andrew Stone. It's very, very generous. Like I said, very humbling, like always, you homie. Whatever you guys were saying. Yeah, and Squig Hog boys still get the pivot axe, so their movement's actually 8. Yeah, exactly. Shout out to Wicked Joe. Yeah, exactly. So that's the data sheet ability doesn't even work for that. It doesn't work for like Spore Mines, for example, either. The Squig Hog boy change. Now there's Squig Bomb itself doesn't make sense. So it's a lot of the time it's like, well, cool. I'm just, what am I paying for now for the Squig Hog boy unit? Very bad. So shout out to you, Wicked Joe, and thank you for that. Yeah, then it does feel like they want us to be, and you're not being a downer. You're just looking at things. And remember, though, this isn't in a vacuum. Overall, the whole meta has changed. And I think Orcs should be positive about that, because whenever the meta is shook up and not necessarily figured out, we do our thing because we plays to the meat and potatoes. We play the mission, we play primary, we play board control, we play attrition. We're not necessarily trying to bully the game with just a couple elite units anyway. So I know it feels like a downer because they're telling you have to play melee, but there's still ways to explore that will impact on Friday and the weeks to come, as we look at how I would look at the rest of the detachments that are already covered. But I'm not looking at Orcs as necessarily like super hurt by this. I just think it's an annoyance, if anything, and just shows GW's inconsistent concern for some factions more than others. Then yeah, it's like if we have -1 to hit, we're already nuked. Yeah, it does impact some stuff. Yeah, Breaker Boys getting. When are they going to give Breaker Boys, Tank Busters, Flash Gets, the Knob keyword? I don't know about all those units adopting it, but I would definitely love this if at least Breaker Boys adopted that, just to give Bully Boys a little bit of fresh air. If you're not willing to bring their points down, at least incorporate them into other detachments so they can become interesting by giving them Knob keyboard. That'd be pretty cool. And yeah, Bikers are legit looking even better. Now, Bikers were already really cool for 70 points. So if you weren't already considering Bikers for Storm Boys once in a while, that's something. But now we have Copters that are also interesting too. But yeah, Bikers are definitely already at a good point cost and something that you could be considering. What's going on? What else with you guys here? Yeah, you should stop bomb squigs to stop infiltrators, stuff like that. Yes, exactly. Yeah, you can give us 100 bomb squigs and I never use them. I don't know about all that, but you would definitely use definitely not all of them, not even half of them, because you'd be advancing half of them, the other half the time. Yeah, then we have Orcs. Let's go. What about Challengers card? I'm still on the fence about to face them. Yeah, we'll look at unpack Challengers art card more now. It does say, do I want to play a more modest game and not be ahead? That way I can have Challenger cards and score that pocket, scoring points, and then end up kind of twisting the game in the end to having just enough. Some people thinking that they can game the system like that. I don't necessarily seeing like that, but it does kind of discourage you from winning the game when you look at it like that. Now, like when I say I don't see it like that, I don't mean I don't mean like it doesn't matter and that it's not real. I do think it matters and that it's real. It's just like I don't think everybody is going to be necessarily doing that. As for at the highest level of competition play, I do think that it's being schemed upon to a considerable amount that people are now starting to consider not using it in competitive play. That's why I want to hold on about how much I unpack this. But as for like your casual friends and what you're doing and you're using this as you go forward, don't think about it in like that much too hard of a way necessarily yet. Let's see how it kind of unpacks in the future, at least for like a couple more days or a week as things are still evolving and unfolding, right? But yeah, but they do seem to impact the game by kind of punishing you for winning, quote unquote winning, right? Then yeah, Death Copter's ability triggers off a reactive move because it's a normal move. So if you fly over someone with your Death Copter on a reactive move, then they take mortal wounds from you flying over them. So yeah, shout out to Brandon for that one. Whoa, keep boys pointed the right way. Yeah, whoa, yeah, you keep them pointed the right way for sure. Andrew Stone, thank you very much, Andrew, for being very generous. You get so shout out to you and all your support. It means a lot, and it's very humbling, of course, as always. So making me blush again. But yeah, thank you to the Ork community, and we'll be good, guys. Don't worry about it. Honestly, I think we're cooking pretty good, to be honest. We got a lot to work up here. Shout out to Two Snatcher. Whoa. Trail by 6, get Challenger guns, turns off profit. Yeah. Play nerf detachments, trail by 6, get Challenger strats, every turn profit, right? Wait, now you can walk through terrain with your Titanic model. Just remember, we ain't last, we ain't AdMac. I know, right? And the stomper should definitely have super heavy keyword. And shout out to Murder Blood Moons. Whoa! Shout out to you, Brett, for all the support. 10 Wild Tactic gifted membership. So thank you, you get and all you do in helping this community and how you participate. So thanks for the love. Shout out to that. Let's get some war bosses in chat for all these generous guys supporting the community and getting you guys some more content in that. So we have playing against Death Guard. Yeah, they definitely how much I couldn't believe how much GW enjoyed dunking on Orks. Now, I don't know about I don't know if they were doing that intentionally, but when you're playing a melee focused Ork army right now, like War Horde or Bully Boys, into current Death Guard, which I do think is going to change in point cost, but how much? Ouch. We'll see. But I do think it's just a very rough matchup, and they were already kind of a rough matchup when they could stack -2 to hit. But now they have new abilities like reducing damage. Now even in combat and in shooting to shoot, which sucks for all our damage too. Their higher toughness. There are definitely changes that matter. But I think we overcome that too. But we'll see when we get to that. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. When they do get changed. Now, as for the Knights. Now, I did want to talk about that. Thanks for reminding me, chat. Yeah, I do think the Knight leaks, quote unquote, do seem to be real. And it does seem like Knights are going to come down. The baby Knights are going to come down to T9, and the big Knights are going to come down to T11. Now, their data sheet abilities and everything like that, we'll look at as it comes out. But Knights coming down is very impactful to the Orks themselves. A lot of the time, they were the gatekeeper army that was taking people down at the mid tables, just beating Orks with stat lines and inefficient trades, giving us a hard time for just simply having a data sheet line that we couldn't compete with in trades and killing efficiency. But now at T9, you can see units of knobs punching them down. Flash kits are going to be wounding big Knights on 5+ now when they're able to get their lethal sustains off. There's so many different combinations that now break different lines that become effective. Even Snagga Boys, for example, like we were talking about, we're talking about the Hunt. So the Knights coming down like that does matter, and we look forward to that as Ork players, right? All game advance in charge by having 1 CP for your snagga boys, right? Could be hilarious. We're just like, oh, baby knight's hunting you. Oh, run up to it, right? Make it your to hunt target, critical 5+s, just beat the crap out of them. That could be super fun. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that if that's the knife changes, to be honest. And yeah, boom, Snazwagon getting dusted off. That's what I'm talking about. And Andrew Stone again near the end with the support as we're closing out with another 10 wall attack to gifted memberships. Whoa, to this gift. So shout out to him. Thank you for all the support. It's very humbling and very generous of you. And check out the premium videos that we have on there where we talk about the hunts and how it might be explored. Keep in mind we're going to have more Perry on coming on here in the future. So thank you, Andrew Stone, for that and everything that you do to support the community. So thank you for all that. It means a lot, and it's very humbling. And so all you gets now, as I just said, we have Mork Perry coming on. We're going to be exploring what this kind of means for the orcs as well next Friday. So not this Friday, next Friday, looking at enemy codexes that are being released and how they could combat or be effective into the orcs and what we can do to counter them. We're going to also just explore the game as a whole between the challenger cards, the missions, the changes. So it's going to be a big one. Stay tuned for that because Mark Perry's been cooking up some good stuff, as we all are, because our detachments are being all updated, our playlists are being updated, and as the changes came out, they came out just in time for our ability to cover Cult of Speed in length and to hunt in length. So we look forward to this because orcs love a good scrap. So if anything, we're going to rise to the challenge, not care about what GW does or what necessarily the competitive community thinks or tries to implore on us. We will explore and make the best of all the scrap loot that we got left and make the most of it. And eventually, things will come around. We shout out to the rumors, right? Again, to Valruk saying that we're going to be the big bads next edition. So this is just the beginning of our Great Wall Orcs. If you're watching here, right? Channel's only 2 years old. We've grown now. We're like 5,800 subs, I think, as of today, this moment. So shout out to you guys for supporting. And we're going to grow. Orcs are going to get a representation. We're getting an identity. We're going to get a big attack moon, and we're going to move around the 40K community and make an impact. And people are going to know that you can't stop the Great Wall. So no matter what GW does to, keep nerfing us and pushing us in weird directions, we're still going to figure it out and find our way, because there's always one thing that you got to keep in mind is don't cross our wall, because we'll knock your teeth out. So check out our paint competition and everything else we got going on in the community for the posts and the memberships. Whoa!